All right, good morning. So we begin our ninth lecture today. And so today we will be essentially beginning a new topic. So we have discussed quite a lot about dynamic programming. Now, one thing I must emphasize that, perhaps at least for me, the most important takeaway from this course should be dynamic programming. And I will try to come back to dynamic programming now and then, especially when we talk about graph algorithms at a later point of time. We'll be talking about two other dynamic programming algorithms, but it's just a suggestion that whenever possible, please practice, solving problems using DP, even if you do not always maybe, write the whole proofs very formally, but at least you should be able to figure out. And please also remember that, in case of problems which are complicated enough that you actually require a DP, please start from the optimal solution. This is one lesson you should never forget ever in your life, because upon seeing a problem, if you just start writing the algorithm, then more often than not, you will see that you will end up with the wrong algorithm. Yeah. So the takeaway is that DPs are perhaps the most important aspects of this course. So if you are unsure about DPs, feel free to speak to us. Yeah. So, I have kept an office hour, but nobody talks to me. So I'm sure we can help you through to become more confident about DPs. Okay. So said that, we move on to our next topic, which is greedy algorithms. And although, they are typically it comes under an umbrella which has been given the name greedy algorithms. But what we will see is that unlike dynamic programming, there is no definite recipe for designing or analyzing greedy algorithms. Okay. So typically what happens is, for some problems, so you can also think about hitting the I am feeling lucky button on Google, right? So essentially you will see some problems and you make some very intuitive local choices, and somehow, just by God's grace, it turns out that these local choices will actually take you to the best possible solution. But for me, it's more of coincidence. Yeah, there are some problems which have such structures that allow us to sort of design such algorithms. But again, we will not, I cannot really give you a golden bullet like a DP, where there is a certain framework that, okay, you first think of the optimal solution, then you write a recurrence, then you convert it to an iterative algorithm. You will see that there are no such recipe. One typical sort of characteristic of greedy algorithms is that the designing of the algorithm itself is typically very easy, because as you will see that the algorithms can be described in 1 or 2 lines. And this is actually in contrast to dynamic programming, where the designing part, in fact, takes the most amount of time. Once you know the recurrence, once you know the recurrence that connects the subproblems, it's relatively easy to prove that this recurrence should be true. Yeah. So in most cases, the proofs happen by contradiction, and it's like 2 or 3 lines of proof. On the other hand, in this case, as we will see, that proofs are the heart of these algorithms. You will see that the proofs are quite non-trivial in some cases, and which is why I'm saying I will not be able to give you 1 or 2 specific recipes of how the proofs will go. Okay. But the way we will do it is as follows. Typically, so we will see, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 problems maybe, which can be solved using greedy algorithms. So typically they can be analyzed using one of 3 techniques. Yeah. And we will see a bit of all these 3 techniques, okay, which are typically used to analyze greedy algorithms. But let me again emphasize that these are no way exhaustive. There are greedy algorithms which are analyzed in completely different ways, which do not fall into this recipe. So you just need to keep it in mind. It's more of an art, and the more you see, the more sort of confident you will become in doing these proofs. Okay. So let's just start with an example. So what we will do today is start with a problem in the area of scheduling. Yeah. So I don't think we have formally seen any problem in scheduling so far in the course, although in your quiz, you essentially saw something like a scheduling problem. Yeah. So remember, you had to pick these events which maximizes your profit. So that broadly falls under the category of scheduling problems. But the one which you're going to study today is, in some sense, it's a more classical scheduling algorithm. Yeah. Classical scheduling problem. Okay, so what are scheduling problems? So typically in a scheduling setting, this is what it will look like. Yeah. So you have been given a bunch of jobs or a bunch of processes which you need to process. Yeah. And so think of these rectangles as a representation of your jobs. And the numbers which are written next to them are the lengths of this job. So what I mean by length here, it's an abstraction of, processing time or processing volume, or however you may want to think about it. So what they basically mean is, if you put them on a machine, then they will consume these many units of time or these many units of resource, right? So for example, in order to finish the job, the yellow job, you need 3 units of time. Okay, so that's what the lengths are denoting. Nothing fancy here. Okay, and remember again, I mean, although we are talking about processes and machines, but these are very generic setting. You can even think about the machine as being people and these jobs as being some abstract jobs. Like somebody can be a chef in a kitchen, and there are orders coming in from a restaurant, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. Now, what is a schedule? Well, a schedule is nothing but an arrangement of the jobs. It's a permutation of the jobs. Yeah. Essentially, you have to specify an order in which you want the jobs to be processed on a single machine. So there are other scheduling problems where you have more than one machine, but for our purposes, we are just sticking to one machine. So you have been given one machine and you have been asked to process all these jobs. Okay. Now, your only job is essentially to figure out this arrangement. Now you can ask, okay, what's the big deal? I can just process them in any order I like. I mean, what's so non-trivial about it? Well, the non-trivial part, of course, is that we would like to optimize certain metric. So when we come up with a schedule, we would like to speak about the quality of the schedule. Yeah. And here is one way of, so there are several ways of measuring the quality of a schedule. There are several metrics that people use in practice. But one of the important matrices is the so-called completion time of jobs. Okay. So what is the completion time? Well, if I look at one specific arrangement, then I just note the time points at which each of the job finishes processing. Right. For instance, if I look at this particular schedule that I'm showing in this slide, well, job 1 clearly has a finish time of 1 because that's the first job you are doing here. The second job has a finish time of 3. Why? Because it's starting at time point 1 and it has a length of 2. So you can, and you need 2 more units to finish this job. Okay, so the finishing time is 3 here. Okay, or let's say completion time, because that's how I'm going to define it. Okay, so similarly, job 4 in this schedule, it has a completion time of 7. So I have 3 till here, and then the length of job 4 is 4. So the completion time is 7. Yeah, and so on and so forth. And the yellow has 10. Okay, so everyone clear what I mean by completion time of a job? Yeah. So one assumption that I'm making for the purpose of this problem is that you cannot break your jobs. Okay. That's also sometimes possible. So you are allowed to, process a part of a job, then maybe, keep it at the back burner for a while, then bring it on. So I don't know if you have already taken a course on operating systems or not, but there is something known as preempting jobs. Yeah. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. So you can process part of a job, you can keep it in your cache or something, you can context switch and then process a part of another job, then bring them in. Okay, that's great. Then you already know about this stuff, right? Good. But in this particular problem, we are assuming that you cannot break jobs. And you can imagine that, this can be a very practical scenario, not necessarily in case of operating system, but in some other resource allocation setting, you might have to finish the whole job before you actually move on to the next one. Yeah. Okay. So that's the thing. Okay. Now, what is our metric? If we want to talk about the quality of the schedule that we have, well, what I what I look at is simply the summation of all the completion times. Okay, you can also think about it as the average completion time is the same thing. You just divide by the total number of jobs. Yeah, but that does not change the, essentially does not change the metric in any way. Okay, average and summation is the same thing. So let's just talk about the summation of completion time. So I would like a schedule such that the summation of completion time of the jobs is as small as possible. Okay, that's my metric. Okay, so now this, if you just add these numbers up, then they add up to 21. But the question is this the best schedule that I can give in terms of completion time? What do you think? Is this the best, or can I do better? Okay, so there is a suggestion that you should sort in ascending order. Okay, so let's see what that gives us. So what Raj suggested is, okay, you just sort the jobs in ascending order, and that will give you the best schedule. That's what he feels. Okay, but at least in this example, we see that if I sort the jobs in ascending order, then the completion time suddenly becomes 20 instead of 21 that we have on the last slide. Yeah. Okay. Chintan has asked a very nice question, that are the jobs arriving all at the same time? Yes. So in this particular case, we assume that all the jobs are given to you. There is no notion of a release time. But that's a great question, because some of the algorithms that we'll talk about here, or some variant of that also works if you consider release times. Okay, if you consider different release times of jobs. But in this particular case, we are not talking about release times. Yeah, so all the release times are same essentially. Okay, so yeah, I guess all of you know this stuff already, that if I sort the jobs in ascending order of completion, ascending order of length, then the summation of completion time will be the best. Okay, it's not clear yet why this should be the case. Yeah, we don't have a proof of this, but let's say this is common knowledge. Let's say this is true. Okay, so everyone clear about the problem definition? That's the first question. I hope there are no ambiguities about the definition itself. Okay, good. So let's now, how is this a good metric? I mean, that's the very good point. Yeah. So what Dave is asking, how is this a good metric? All the jobs finish. What is your question? I mean, yeah, all the jobs finally finish at the same time, no matter what. What do you mean all the jobs finish at the same time? Here Dave, here different jobs are finishing at different times, right? All the jobs finish at the same time, that's okay. But if you look at from the perspective of individual jobs, then this schedule and this schedule might look very different. So it's not true that they are the same schedule. In fact, I have not yet defined the real problem that we are solving here. Then you will realize that it's even more important that these two schedules are actually making quite a bit of difference. Okay. So it's true that everyone will finish at the, I mean, if you consider all the jobs, then in any schedule, they will finish at the same time. That's just the total length of all jobs. Okay. But here we are not summing up the total length. Remember, we are summing up the completion time of jobs. Okay. All right. So let me repeat the question once more. So what we are looking here, what we are looking at is we are taking the completion time of each job and we are summing them up. So that's my metric. Yeah. So somebody was not clear about that. Okay. I think there is still a doubt. Okay. So let's say, okay. So somebody is saying, why isn't the answer 1 + 2 + 3 + 4? Well, remember, that's not the completion time of the job. So when you say 1 + 2 + 3 + 4, these are not the completion time of the jobs. These are just the lengths of the jobs. Okay. So this 1 is the length of the first job, 2 is the length of the second job, but the completion time of the second job is not the same. The completion time is this time point. So you have to imagine that you are starting at 0. Then what is the completion time of the second job? It's actually 3. Why? Because the job 2 has waited for 1 unit of time, because job 1 was processing at that time, and then it was scheduled. So that takes an additional 2 units of time, which means that the completion time is actually 3 for job number 2. Similarly, for job number 3, it had to wait for the first 3 time units because the other 2 jobs were processing, and then it was scheduled. It itself takes 3 units of time to finish. So which means that the completion time is really 6. Yeah, exactly. So that's so what Dipankar is writing here is the summation of all the completion times. Okay, so this is 1, this is 3, this is 6, and this is 10. Okay, yeah. Right. Okay. Is it clear now? So those who are confused that why isn't it 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4? Yeah. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is just the, sort of the total length of all jobs. And of course, the last job will always finish. The last job will always finish at that time. Okay. Great. So good. So यहाँ तक समझ में आ गया ना? The previous slide. Yes, Arunim, this is the previous slide. Okay. So yeah, so here the completion times were slightly different because the first job completed again at time point 1, the second job completed at time point 3, the third job completed at time point 10, and the fourth job actually completed at time point 7 here. Okay. So the total sum of completion times is actually 21. Okay. Okay. Any more question? So let's just clear the doubts before we move on. All right. Great. Good. So, but that's too easy, right? I mean, that's an easy problem. We'll all know if we sort them in increasing or in sort of ascending order of processing time or shortest job first, then we are actually optimum. So let's add a little twist to this problem. Okay. So now I'm changing this problem setting a little bit. So of course it's almost same as before. We still have n jobs, yeah, and each job. So let's say job Ji has a length of Li, but now in addition, I also tell you that every job has some sort of a weightage. Okay, so think of these as priorities of your job. So there might be some jobs which are a bit more important to you than compared to the other ones. So you have some sense of a priority, yeah, and you attach a priority to each and every one. And let's just assume that this priority is always positive, yeah. Otherwise, it makes no sense. All right. So that's my change problem definition. And now I again ask you to come up with a schedule which will minimize the summation of so instead of just summation of completion time, what we want to minimize is the summation of the weighted completion time. Okay. So I will multiply whatever the completion time of a job is, I will multiply it with its weight, and I will then take the summation. Okay. So that's my modified problem definition. So this I call the minimizing weighted completion time problem. Okay, so let's just see this example again. So now, the length of the jobs remain the same, but in addition, I have put some weights against each job. Okay, so job 1 has a weight of 1, job 2 has a weight of 3, and so on and so forth. Right? So let's see how the setup now changes completely. Okay, so let's just take this golden schedule that we had before, right? We said that, okay, if you just if you just sort the jobs in increasing order of their processing, increasing order of their processing times, then that's the best schedule that you can have. Okay, so let's see what that gives us in this case. So in this case, if you notice, then if I just sum up these WIs, CIs, then that will give me 69. Okay, so the weighted completion time of this particular schedule turns out to be 69. Hopefully I have done the calculation correctly. Okay, right. But very surprisingly, there is a different schedule which is completely different from the other two that we saw before, which actually gives me a weighted completion time of 65. So here, note that the yellow job is being processed first, followed by the blue, the red, and finally the green one. Okay. So now at least you should start appreciating that this is now a non-trivial problem, because this ordering that we are seeing here, it's not clear what ordering this is really, right? I mean, it's clearly not ascending or descending. It's not even like ascending in weights or descending in processing size or anything like that. This is this is quite different and quite non-trivial a schedule. Yeah. And in fact, you can very well ask a question that, how do you know that 65 is the right answer here? Why can't there be a schedule that is, let's say, 55? Yeah, that gives me a weighted completion time of 55. Okay, you can ask that question. So we will talk about an algorithm to do that. But before that, is the problem definition absolutely clear, or is there still some doubts about what we're trying to do? Okay, so you need to come up with a permutation of the jobs which will minimize the summation of weighted completion times. Okay, that's the problem. Good. Right, so because we are talking about greedy algorithms, somebody asked that, will a greedy approach work at all? So yeah, because we are talking about greedy algorithms, a very particular greedy approach is going to work. But before that, I think there was a very interesting suggestion that, okay, why don't I multiply these quantities? So let's say previously I was sorting in order of non-decreasing processing time, right? Or increasing processing times. Instead of that, why can't I just do the following? I will just multiply LIs and WIs, and I will sort according to them, right? So do you think this is a good solution? Okay. So that's I think I will leave that as an exercise. So idea number one is multiply LI, WI and sort. Okay. Now again, sorting can be of two different types. There could be a sorting in ascending order. There could be a sorting in descending order. Yeah. But it turns out that, you can come up with very easy examples, even using 2 or 3 jobs, where none of this is going to give you the optimal thing. Okay. So there is one more suggestion: sort with W, but for 2 same W, sort with L. Okay. So good. So that is almost correct. But now can somebody suggest, taking these ideas, that, okay, so multiplication is not going to help. Okay, and I think you can figure out, and it's a very easy example. Maybe you can do it with 2 jobs or something. But what do you think can help here really? So let's think about it this way. So suppose all the weights were 1. Okay, suppose all the weights were 1. Then this problem is exactly the summation of completion time minimization that we were solving previously. Okay, so we said that, okay, if you sort them in sort of increasing order of increasing order of processing time, then this actually gives you the best solution. But now you have these weights. Okay, so suppose this weight is 1. Now increasing order of something, can I interpret this in a slightly different way if weights are all 1? Okay, very good. So Siddharth is suggesting, can we arrange them in ascending order of CI over WI? Okay. Okay, by the way, what is CI, Siddharth? You mean LI, I guess, right? Siddharth, we don't know CI. Okay, so Siddharth is suggesting that should we arrange in ascending order of CI over WI? Okay, Naval, that's not true. Yeah. So what Naval is saying, that doesn't gonna work in this example. So if I arrange in ascending order of LI over WI, is it going to work is the question. Okay, actually it does in this example. Yeah, so it turns out, okay, so I am not going to say it as ascending order of Li over Wi, but it turns out that the greedy choice you need to make here is decreasing order or non-increasing order of Wi over Li. Okay, very good. Doesn't the value of Ci depend on the value of Wi? Okay, good. So the value of Ci just depends on the schedule. Arunim, the value of Ci itself does not depend on Wi. When you are looking at the final metric, then you are multiplying your Ci with your Wi. Okay, Ci depends on nothing but the schedule and nothing else. Yeah, it just depends on when you are finishing your job. But remember, what we are trying to minimize here is the summation of Wi-Ci. We are not just trying to minimize the summation of Ci's. So that's where the weights come into picture. Okay, right? Right. Yeah. So which Wi to consider first? Right. Right. Okay. So okay. So now the question is that why is why did we even come up with this thing, right? So one way of thinking about this is the following. So again, remember, if all the weights are 1, then this is intuitive, because if all the weights of 1, so for example, if Wi equals to 1 for all I, then we are sorting in decreasing order of 1 over Li. Okay, and note that this exactly matches what we did when we did not have weights. So W equals to 1 essentially means the weights are all 1. So it's the unweighted setting. It's just the summation of completion time. So there we said we will do the shortest job first. Now saying that we'll do the shortest job first is the same as saying that I will do 1 over the largest job first. Yeah. So it's the same thing. So essentially, at least that intuition should start making sense. Yeah. That if all the weights are 1, then this exactly captures the algorithm that we saw was good in the other case. Yeah. Now, why Wi over Li works? Of course, yeah, you can think about this as something like, you know, if the weight of a job is very high and the processing size of a job is relatively less, then you should try to finish that job as early as possible, right? Because, you know, if you delay that job till the very end, then since the weight is very high, it's going to unnecessarily, you know, incur a lot of cost in your final summation. So that's one intuition. So the intuition comes from the two things, right? One thing is that we know in the unweighted setting, if we process a smaller job earlier, then it's beneficial for us. Whereas in this case, because we are multiplying with weights, we should not delay the high weight jobs too much, because that's going to incur a lot of multiplicative factor in the final summation. So it's somehow these two intuitions are coming into action together, right? So it's Wi over Li. Yeah. Okay. So you can even think of other kind of metric which does this trade-off, right? So you can ask, okay, why don't we then do Wi minus Li? Maybe that's also a valid thing, but it turns out that even that does not work. So as I said, there is no, intuitive reason of why the greedy algorithms work. So you just try a few things and then one of them just works. Okay, and of course we are going to prove that this is the best one. Okay. Okay, so is the algorithm clear to everyone what we are doing? Okay, and the runtime I think is very clear, right? What should be the runtime? It's just n log n. It's sorting, essentially it's sorting n numbers. You just make n, you just take n ratios and you sort them in non-decreasing order. Okay, so this is order n log n. Okay, Soham is asking what? Yeah, I said that typically when you see a problem like this, you just try out a few metric. For example, Gaurav was suggesting that why don't you multiply and sort? Yeah, so something like that. Right. So yeah, exactly. So there is no silver bullet. So in case of greedy algorithm, I mean, you just need to sort of it's more intuitive, right? You try out a few things and then one of them is going to work. Okay. Sometimes, well, I mean, there are certain problems where you can do some sort of I don't know, educated guesses, but it's very rare. Right. Okay, great. So now on to the main task, right? We go on to prove that this is actually going to be optimal. Yeah. So, right. So Shruti asks a very important question, that how do we know that which problems can be solved using greedy? So the answer is that, so the way I look at it is most problems cannot be solved using greedy algorithms. So you first try out a few obvious greedy choices, you come up with counter examples, and then just move on to designing a dynamic programming. Okay. Good. Okay. So now on to the main thing, right? So why does this work? Okay. So basically, it's basically the main meat of designing greedy algorithms, that why should this work? So as I said, I'm going to give you 3 different techniques by which we prove greedy algorithms or correctness of greedy algorithms. Okay. And the first one that we are going to talk about today is what I call exchange arguments. Okay. So, okay. So what is an exchange argument? Yeah. So exchange argument is the following, that, so suppose, so what is the main idea of an exchange argument? Before going on to apply the exchange argument to our specific problem, let's just talk about the main idea behind exchange argument. So, okay, where are we? So we have a greedy schedule, right? And we want to somehow prove that this is really the optimal. No other solution, no other permutation can give you a better weighted completion time, or better sum of weighted completion time. Okay. So let's fix that schedule. So let's call this schedule sigma, small sigma. Okay. So that's my greedy schedule. Now, suppose this is not optimal. Now, then of course, there has to be another optimal solution, which is better than sigma. So let's call that schedule sigma star. Okay. And now what we will do is, as we always do, we will try to arrive at some sort of a contradiction. Okay. And in particular, the contradiction we will try to arrive at is, we will start with sigma star and we will convert it to another solution and show that that has an even better cost. Okay. So are you getting the point? So we have our greedy schedule. So we'll assume that this is not optimal. So then there has to be another optimal, which looks different from our greedy algorithm's output. Starting from there, we will arrive at a contradiction by producing a solution that is even better than sigma star. Yeah. But then if sigma star is the optimal, then there cannot be an even better solution, right? So that's the contradiction that we will arrive at. And the way we do it is what we call an exchange argument. And after I describe it, it will become very obvious why this is called an exchange argument. Okay. But that's the overall skeleton. So let's get into business with this. Okay. So suppose sigma is my schedule, as I had said earlier. And let's just assume, without loss of generality, that this is the order. So J1, J2, JK, JK plus 1 up to Jn. This is the ordering in our greedy schedule. Okay. And remember, because it's greedy, I can claim that W1 over J1 is greater than W2 over J2. Okay, by the way, I am just assuming here that everything is distinct. Yeah. So assuming Wi over, oh, this is Li, right? L1, L2. Wi over Li are distinct. Okay. Okay. So this is clear to everyone. So all I'm doing is just writing out my schedule, which is this one. And because of my greedy choice, I know that this has to be true. Okay. Now let's do this thought experiment. Let's think of this other golden solution which somebody claimed to be optimal. तो उसने कह दिया कि भाई तुम्हारा optimal नहीं है. Yeah, Raghav, we will take that case when Wi and Li can be equal. So we will take that case once we finish this part. So because this is easier to explain. So we'll do this and then we'll go on to that. Okay. So मान लो किसी ने बोल दिया कि नहीं भाई तुम्हारा ये फालतू है. There is this other schedule sigma star which is better than your schedule. Okay. तो ठीक है. You ask him or her to write it down. Okay. ठीक है. So now okay. So now the point is that, so let's assume that, let's see the first point where our schedule differs from this schedule in sigma star. Okay? Okay? So everyone clear about what I'm saying? So what I'm saying here is that let's look at the first time point where our schedule looks different from sigma star. So यहाँ पे what I'm assuming is till the jobs J1 to Jk minus 1, our schedule and the optimal schedule looks exactly the same. Okay. And it's only at the kth job where there is a swap. Okay. So suppose this has happened. अब ये तो होना पड़ेगा, because if there is no swap in the optimal solution with respect to our schedule, then of course our schedule is also optimal. So this has to happen at some point of time. Okay. So suppose I mark this pair as Jk plus 1 and Jk. Yeah. So मेरे schedule में Jk appeared before Jk plus 1, but in the optimal schedule, Jk plus 1 appears before Jk. Okay. ठीक है? Everybody clear about this part? What we are trying to do? So all this is thought experiment. Yeah. So suppose this has happened. Now what I will do is the following. What I will do is, okay, that's very good. So I am not claiming that the optimal has only one swap. I am just looking at the time point where the first swap is happening. Okay, just give me a second. Yeah, so this is a bit important to understand. I am not claiming that there is only one inversion in the optimal solution with respect to my schedule. So I am just looking, if I start looking from the left, okay, that's a very good point. Yeah, I was trying to sweep that under the rug. Okay, so what Utkrisht is saying, that why do you say that the swap is happening between between the consecutive elements? Yeah, that's a very, very valid point. So let's say that, okay, so let's change the notations a little bit. Okay, so let me first clarify the question they're asking. Yeah, this was my mistake. So what they're asking is, when you are assuming that there is an inversion, then why do you assume that the inversion in opt is just between two consecutive elements? So that's a very, very valid point. So let me just change this. So this is not Jk, but this is, let's say J. Let me give some other name. So let's say this is Jm. Okay, happy? But at least I can claim that m is less than k plus 1. Abhi theek hai? Theek hai? Is this okay now? Right? So okay. So the question they are asking is, why do you say that two consecutive elements were swapped? Yeah, that's not necessary. So ये हो सकता है कि this is the first time there is a different guy Jm which actually should appear before Jk plus 1 in my schedule. Yeah, and in this schedule it actually appears after Jk plus 1. Okay, so let's say that has happened. So now what I do is I produce another schedule. Again, all this is going on in my mind. I produce another schedule where I swap the places of these two jobs. Okay, so this is what I do. So I take the schedule sigma star and I just swap the places. So मैं Jm जो Jk plus 1 था उसके जगह पे now I do Jm. So this is Jm, and जो jk plus जो jm था उसके जगह में I do jk plus 1. Okay, I swap the places of these two jobs. ठीक है? Is this clear to everyone what we are doing? Okay, again remember m is a number which is less than k plus 1. Okay, otherwise this is not an inversion. So there is an inversion in the optimal that has happened by our assumption. So I am just trying to correct that inversion. I'm just swapping the places of these two. Okay. Okay. Great. So now here is a question again. So this is this was JM and this is JM. Okay. Now here is the question. So when I do this swapping, which are the jobs that are really affected? Whose completion time is going to be affected? So compared to sigma star, if I compare these two schedules, one is sigma star and the other one is sigma prime, where I have exchanged these two jobs, which are the jobs whose completion time do you think is going to be affected? The jobs between them. So Dev, there is no job between them. So these are the two jobs which are consecutive in opt schedule. Yeah. So this is how opt schedule look like. So JK plus 1 came first, and immediately after that there was JM. Yeah. Right. So I'm just swapping those two. So if I swap just those two, then which is the job that is going to be affected? Which are the only jobs that are going to be affected? Exactly, right? So because I am just swapping these two guys, then the only jobs, exactly, the only jobs that are going to be affected are really just these two guys, okay? So only completion time of JM and JK plus 1 are going to be affected. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Yeah, right. So if I just exchange two jobs, how they became consecutive? They were consecutive, right, Siddharth? I mean, I just take, so this is what we claim, right? That, so I'm not saying that the indices are consecutive, but these are two jobs which are sitting side by side in opt schedule, right? Yeah. Siddharth, is this clear? This is a bit important to understand. So I'm just looking at optimal schedule. Yeah. And I'm saying that the optimal schedule is different from my schedule. So there has to be a first point where there is an inversion with respect to my schedule. And I'm saying that this is the inversion that is happening. So there is a job, JK plus 1, and then there is a job JM sitting next to it, such that M is actually less than K plus 1. So M should have been, I mean, these two places is different, this order is different in my schedule, respect to this schedule. But in the optimal schedule, they are really sitting side by side. So there is no, there are no jobs in between them. No, non-consecutive in terms of indices. Okay. So what we did is we swapped. So the confusion was different. The confusion was that the indices might not be consecutive. So in optimal schedule, I cannot claim that JK plus 1 and JK are sitting side by side, right? That I cannot claim. But the point is that because the opt schedule looks different from greedy schedule, there has to be a first point where there is an inversion. What is an inversion? An inversion is there has to be a JK plus 1 and a JM such that the index of M is actually less than K plus 1. So if you look at the greedy schedule, then JM appears before JK plus 1, somewhere before JK plus 1. Okay, I don't know where, but it has to appear somewhere before it.
So this is the first point where this is happening. यहाँ तक सब कुछ एकदम same है. Okay. So the indices are not consecutive, but these two jobs in the optimal schedule, they are sitting next to each other, right? Okay. We swap them. No, I'm not saying we swap them back. We don't know their correct position. All I'm saying that I am just swapping these two. Okay. I'm just swapping these two. Like in place of JK plus 1, now I schedule JM. In place of JM, I schedule JK plus 1. I don't know whether this is the correct position again, but what I'm doing is this very, very local swap in my mind. Okay. I just exchange these two jobs. Okay. So that creates my new schedule, right? So now the question I had asked is, if I created this new schedule, which are the only jobs that are going to be affected? Okay. And the answer is that only these two jobs are going to be affected because I'm doing this exchange very, very locally. I am just, swapping one job in place of other. So whatever was going on before and whatever was going on after this thing, they are not going to be affected by this swap. But of course, these two jobs completion time is definitely going to be affected. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Let me actually draw a picture for this one. So what was happening before is, so there were these jobs. Okay. Then at some point, there was JK plus 1 and there was JM. Okay, so this was my sigma star. And then after the swap, JM came before and JK plus 1 was pushed to later. Okay, this is my sigma. Okay, good. So now so there are still some doubts. It will not affect the entire range. So, okay, whom should it affect? So remember, okay, let's see whether it can happen. Can it affect anyone who is there? Does it affect the completion time of anybody who is there? Clearly not, right? Does it affect the completion time of anyone who is here? कैसे होगा? क्योंकि इनका जो टोटल लेंथ है वो तो अभी भी सेम ही है, राइट? JK plus 1 और JM का जो टोटल लेंथ है वो तो अभी भी सेम है, राइट? और बीच में कोई नहीं है. These are two consecutive jobs. This is very important. Yeah. There is no job between JK plus 1 and JM. वो होता तो हम कर नहीं पाते ये. But the point is that's not happening, right? So the starting time of these pair and the total length remains invariant. So the only thing that is going to be affected is these two things. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. So now let's figure out. Okay. Yeah, I think I should have made one more blank page. Okay. Let's do this later. So let's finish the calculation here. Okay. So now let's see what is the change in completion time. Okay. So change in completion time in weighted completion time of sigma prime with respect to sigma star. Okay. Now, what is going to be the change in the completion time? So let's see. So weighted completion time of sigma star. Well, what was this? This was, let's say, I denote sigma to denote the weighted completion time of everybody who is not JK plus 1 or JM. ठीक है? तो बाकी सबको मैं डाल दिया. So J, so this is over all I, which is not either K plus 1 or M. Okay. Unka WI times CI star. Okay. But then I have to add WK plus 1 times CK plus 1 star plus WM CM star. Okay. How about WCT of sigma prime? Well, this part exactly remains the same. That's what we had argued, that it does not affect the completion time of any job which is other than k plus 1 or m. The only thing that is affected now is these two completion times. Okay, the weight of course remains the same. So times ck plus 1 prime plus wm times cm prime. Okay. So now let's just take the difference of these two. So let's subtract, one from the other. Okay. So WCT minus WCT sigma star. This is going to be what? Well, this is going to be W k plus 1 times ck prime minus ck plus 1 star plus wm times cm prime minus cm star. Okay, यहाँ तक सबको समझ में आ गया? There is nothing. I just wrote some notations, nothing else. Okay. Now the important question that we need to answer is, what is the value of this quantity? So if I go back to the previous picture, right? So this is nothing but the change of completion time of the job k plus 1. Okay. First of all, इनका completion time increase होगा या decrease होगा? Is it increasing or decreasing of k plus 1? So after I do the swap, k plus 1 का increase हो रहा है, right? So after I did the swap, because I pushed k plus 1 after jm, so it's going to increase. By how much is it going to increase? Okay, so the question I'm asking is, after I did the swap, by how much is the completion time of jk plus 1 going to increase? Well, it's exactly going to be the length of the job m. Yeah, it's exactly going to be lm, because पहले ये यहाँ पर हो रहा था, अभी ये थोड़ा सा push हो गया. कितना push हो गया? Exactly, so it has to wait till the time jm now finishes processing. Okay, so basically this length, lm. Okay, so this quantity, let me use a different color here. So this quantity is actually L of m. And what is this quantity? It decreases by the length of k plus 1. Right. Yeah, Sachlin, I will come to that question in a bit. Okay. But at least we know that this one decreases by the length of Lk plus 1. ठीक है? सबको समझ में आ गया ये? Right? So just like the completion time of jk plus 1 increases by the length of lm, similarly, if I look at the job m in the new schedule compared to the sigma star, then its completion time actually decreases. By how much does it decrease? Well, it decreases by the length of k plus 1, because previously it was waiting for k plus 1. Now it's not waiting for k plus 1 anymore. Okay. So Sachlin had asked an interesting question. She's asking that after this swap, is k plus 1 at its right place? Okay, first of all, what do you mean by right place? I think by right place, what you are meaning is with respect to our schedule, right? That's what you mean by the right place with respect to sigma. But that is not clear because remember, this is the first inversion, right? So this has nothing to do anymore with the original sequencing. All I'm saying is that with respect to the original sequence, this is the first inversion that is happening. But I don't know if there are more inversions in sigma star with respect to sigma even at later point of time. So it might very well be the case that there is a job sitting here, sorry, in this guy, there's a job sitting here which is, let's say, called, I don't know, JQ, which again appears before JM which appears before JK plus 1 in my original schedule. But the point is, I am not even concerned with that. Okay, because I am just doing only one swap and I am trying to produce this new schedule, and somehow I'm trying to convince you that I actually improve the solution by doing this swap, which we haven't done yet completely. Okay, good, but let's at least finish this calculation now. So what can I say about this quantity? Okay, I think the space is there's a space crunch. Yeah, I did not anticipate that I will need so much space. What should I do? Okay, let's do here. There is a lot of space here. Okay, so what we have is the delta of completion time. So the change in completion time is equal to WK plus 1 times LM minus WM times L of K plus 1. Okay. So now the question is, what can I comment about this quantity? Is this quantity positive or negative? So this quantity, is it positive or negative? Okay. And now I have to appeal to my greedy schedule, right? So remember, in my greedy schedule, M had appeared before K plus 1. That's my assumption. That's why I say that this is an inversion. So if that is the case, so since M is less than K plus 1, this implies that M appears before K plus 1 in sigma, right? Now, what does this imply? This implies that WM over LM is bigger than WK plus 1 over LK plus 1. Okay, so this quantity is actually negative, right? Okay, so this implies that, so if I call this star, then star is negative. Okay, so what does this imply now? This implies that the weighted completion time of sigma star is less than the weighted completion time of sigma star, which is a contradiction. Okay. ठीक है? Right. Okay. So Harsh, so what Harsh is asking is why there are no jobs between K plus 1 and M. So let's do this slowly. So what we are assuming is कि देखो ऐसे सोचो कि so दोनों schedule चल रहा है, right? So Harsh, I am replying to you. So दोनों schedule चल रहा है. One is your greedy schedule and another is this optimal schedule. ठीक है? So let's say till some point, these two schedules look exactly the same. Okay, right? Then at some point, there is an inversion. So inversion matlab kya hai? Ki inversion matlab hai ki there is an index such that, you know, in your optimal schedule, there is an index which we call K plus 1 here because I messed up the slides completely. So let's say that index is K plus 1. And here you have an index which is M that should have appeared before K plus 1. Okay. So this is the first point that such a thing is happening. And the point is, if the optimal schedule looks different from your schedule, then there has to be a point where there are two consecutive jobs which look like this. So essentially just think of two consecutive jobs such that the index of the second one is lower than the index of the first one. This is all we are saying here. But we cannot say that this is exactly the next one. That might not have happened because sigma star might look completely different. Okay. So what Shruti is asking is, what is at the position in sigma star where JM is in sigma? That we don't know, right? And we don't care about this. Right. Yeah, Siddharth, that is exactly what we are doing. We are just swapping the places of these two jobs. I mean, we are not here to just correct the schedule or anything. I mean, I'm just swapping the position of these two jobs. We are just exchanging, like exchanging two consecutive jobs. But in order to do the argument, you have to say that such a point will actually exist. And the reason such a point will actually exist is because the optimal solution looks different from your greedy algorithm. Okay. Okay, so what Alok is asking is, can't we consider them to be only consecutive jobs and then argue that we can get the optimal solution as a series of such swaps? Alok, the problem with that is, if you take them to be consecutive jobs, so first of all, what do you mean by consecutive jobs? Consecutive with respect to your greedy algorithm? Do you mean that? So let's say you talk about job number 9 and job number 10. Okay, so Alok is asking the following question, that why are we taking JK plus 1 and JM? Why can't we just take two consecutive jobs? Why can't we just look at the greedy algorithm, look at two consecutive jobs and swap their positions? Why do you think that is a problem? So suppose this is your greedy schedule, right? So this is your greedy schedule. Okay. Right? And then you are looking at the sigma star, and suppose you find that, okay, here there was JK and JK plus 1, right? Whereas in the optimal schedule, there is a sort of a swap. Yeah. So JM has suddenly appeared here, and JK plus 1 appeared after that. Okay. So something like that. But the problem is, now if you try to swap JK and JK plus 1, for example, Alok, but you don't know where in the optimal schedule JK was actually there. It might be at a very later point of time. Maybe JK was here. But now if you swap these two guys, then you are going to screw up the completion time of several jobs which are in between. And that's, I don't know how to make that argument then. This crucially depends on the fact that the entire calculation crucially depends on the fact, maybe it will work, but I'm saying that the calculation might be more complicated. But we don't need to do that, is my answer. Yeah, because I know that whatever job, I mean, there has to be a point where there has to be a switch. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. How do we got sigma? Okay. Let me do this again slowly. Yeah, I think there are some. Let me do this slowly. Okay. We have enough time. So what we are doing here simply is the following. So I start with, let's say this is my schedule. Okay. Sorry, this is not. This is sigma. This is my schedule. So here I have J1, J2, J3. Okay. Some JK, JK plus 1. And so on and so forth. Yeah, up to Jn. Okay. Now I have sigma star. So suppose J1, J2, and let's say up to Jk minus 1. Up till this point, opt schedule and my schedule looked exactly the same. Okay. Now here, suppose Jk is not here. Okay. Suppose here, instead of JK, there is some JM. Okay, right? And I don't know, JK was probably scheduled somewhere here. Okay? But all I know is that, what do I know here? Yeah. So what I know here is that K is actually less than M. Yeah. So JM was clearly scheduled somewhere here in the greedy schedule, but suddenly JM came here in opt schedule. Okay. So all I'm saying is if there is an inversion, then there has to be a first point where some inversion is happening. This is all I'm saying. So there has to be a point, yeah, where there are two jobs such that they should have been in the swap position in your greedy solution. Okay, so they should have appeared in the opposite direction and not in the order in which it appears in sigma star. Okay, whether it's correct or wrong, there is no correct or wrong here. I mean, this is just a difference with respect to the greedy schedule. Now, all I'm saying is that there has to be a switch. No, absolutely not. That it doesn't have to be JK plus 1. We are not making an assumption, Aryan. All we are doing here is that we are saying that यहाँ पे JK आने वाला था और JK के जगह यहाँ पे JM आ गया, तो JK must have been scheduled somewhere at a later point of time, and so there must have been a switch. Yeah, Sachlin, it depends on which two you are swapping. Okay, so I mean the whole argument depends on the fact that you are swapping two consecutive jobs. Okay, and if you swap two consecutive jobs, then nobody outside those two consecutive jobs are going to be affected. This is the only thing I am claiming. Okay, and this is why I am, right. So in this case, yeah, if I assume that K plus 1 is here, then I will just swap these two, right? So I'm assuming that the swapping actually takes place here. This is the first place where the swap is taking place. Yeah. So I'm just identifying that position. Okay. But now I'm interested in what Alok was saying. So Alok, what you are saying is we can still swap the really two consecutive jobs, but I don't see how you can do that. Can you really do that? No, but the point is that JK might appear at a very late position, sir. Late position, no? Okay, so maybe I will unmute Alok and let's see what he has to say. Okay, Alok, can you just unmute and say?
Yes, sir. So all I'm saying is that let's not even consider it like this. Let's just consider that the greedy solution is like, I mean, pretty much similar to this only. So like it's like a series of jobs, let's just say J1 to JK, where it's like it's the optimal solution and the greedy solution and matching. However, after JK, the order changes. It becomes something else in the optimal solution, but in the greedy solution, it's the same. What I'm trying to say, sir, is that you can get that remaining part of the optimal solution by doing a series of consecutive swaps on the greedy solution itself. So like
I agree. But the point is, how do you prove that for each swap, you are actually improving the solution?
Yes, sir. So the way to prove it is like if you make any swap, like JK and JK plus 1, you will always what is the difference that's happening? It's not affecting the jobs before. It's not affecting the jobs after.
No, why? So this is the part that I don't understand. So what are we assuming? So suppose in this picture, so JK minus 1 ke baad we have JM here, right? And JK should have been in this position.
Right? So that's not what I'm saying, sir. I'm saying that just consider two consecutive jobs. I'm trying to come to a solution from my greedy solution. Like I'm trying to get to the optimal solution by the greedy solution. I'm saying that at each step, I'm increasing my time. So my optimal solution will be worse than my greedy solution. So my greedy solution is my optimal solution.
So you are starting with the greedy solution and gradually changing it to your optimal solution and saying that it will make your solution worse at every point.
Exactly, so. And the way to do it is just to see, for instance, if like just consider JK and JK plus 1, the swap between that. Then maybe JK again, like after JK comes to the position of JK plus 1, maybe I swap it with JK plus 2 to get to maybe the right position of K in my optimal solution. And at each step, because I mean, you can just by this argument, it should be.
So what you are saying is, yeah, this part I understand is exactly going to be the same because you are swapping these two jobs. But what you are saying is that, okay, after a series of such swaps, you would have converted your greedy solution to the optimal solution, and in the process you could have only made your solution worse. Is that what you are trying to say?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. So yeah, Soham, the concern what Soham has is also my concern.
Sir, it's a sorted array, so it has to be. You can get it by consecutive swaps. It should not make a difference because obviously.
No, what is sorted is the greedy schedule, but sigma star is not sorted. It's an arbitrary schedule, right?
Yes, sir. So for instance, the only thing that can happen is, for instance, like if it is sorted, it essentially means that all the other jobs that are greater than it are after it, right? That's what the meaning of the word sorted would be. Yeah. Right now, if I'm ever making a consecutive swap, only the element before it is going to get affected. But I don't see why I cannot. Like you can, I don't think like there'll be a counterexample to this.
Yeah, the only worry I have is that, see, you are starting with a sorted schedule, right? Right? That's true, right? You are starting with a schedule, which is your greedy schedule. That is J1 to Jn.
Yes, sir.
And then you are saying that whenever you see a flip, you just swap those two consecutive things.
No, sir. He's not actually saying that you should start from the greedy sequence.
Okay.
He's actually telling you a way to actually arrive to the optimal sequencing.
No, but then we have to prove that greedy is optimal, right?
Yeah, it is very easy to prove. You just start with any sequence, and then you consider two consecutive elements. Now let us just consider
start with any sequence. Okay, let's start with the opt sequence. Let's say.
Which sequence?
Let's say we start with the optimal sequence. Let's say sigma star.
If the sequence is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, let us just not consider any terms that you have used in this proof. I'm just telling you another, like a more simpler argument.
Yeah. Okay.
So let us just consider any ordering O of these sequences. Now you consider any two consecutive elements in this ordering, and find out the condition such that the first of these consecutive elements should appear before this second element in the optimal solution using using normal mathematical relations. I'm not just talking about this problem. It applies to every problem. So
let's talk about this problem for now. Okay.
Sir, actually, I didn't do this problem.
What?
Yes, sir.
So no. But the whole point is that, see, if your thing works, then let's start with the optimal schedule, right? So what you are claiming is that you can do a series of swaps and you can go to this sorted thing, right? This is what you are claiming.
Sir, by optimal, do you mean the sorted thing or what?
No. The optimal is some optimal. We are claiming that the sorted thing is not optimal, right?
Sir, That is your proof. I am presenting another argument. I'm not continuing on that.
Actually, so just to give, sorry, Gaurav, I'm cutting you, but the thing that he said about inversions to get to the sorted array, so you can think of it in the other way. So bubble sort kya hota hai? Basically like consecutive sorts se hota hai na, to get to the sorted array.
Right.
So if you just if you have got an unsorted array, you can always sort it to like make swaps to get to the sorted array. So you can do the opposite way to get to the unsorted array as well, right? So exactly the opposite series of steps to get to an unsorted array.
Right.
So that is one part of the proof to prove that is going to be
correct. But that is exactly what I said, right? I mean, that is exactly what I did. So I just did one step of bubble sort, if you think about it. So what I said was that, okay, if the optimal schedule looks different from your sorted schedule, then there has to be a point where there are two consecutive elements which are inverted. I mean, that's what bubble sort is, right?
Yes, sir. That is exactly what he said. That okay, sir. Let us not just call sigma star as the optimal for now. Let us just call it any ordering. So what Alok claimed was that if you consider any two consecutive elements which do not hold this property, it will always be better to swap them, because when they do when we do swap them, we will always land up with a better solution.
Yeah, but I don't see why this is different from what I argued. I mean, it's the same thing, right?
So,
the only thing I'm saying is that when you start with this arbitrary schedule, you have to just say that there is some inversion. And if there is some inversion, then there has to be a consecutive, then there has to be a point where there are two consecutive elements which are inverted. This is the only thing I'm claiming.
So the very first thing that is different is that you can actually come up with a relation by which to compare the sequence. Like you claim that Wi upon Li should be the factor using which you should compare, right? Using this, using Alok's argument, you can actually come up with that. You don't have to guess that.
No, I mean, that's just because of this problem. I mean, it depends on what metric you are.
No, sir, it works for every problem.
Okay, sir, maybe. I'm not getting it completely, but let's see the other questions. Okay, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So, right. So I think, yeah, there was yeah. Okay. So let's just summarize. Okay. I think it was quite a bit of mess today, but let's just try to summarize it once again. So what are we trying to do? I think all of us are essentially saying very similar things. So eventually, what does an exchange argument mean, right? An exchange argument means exactly this, that you assume that your solution is not the optimal one. So let's say sigma was your schedule and there is a different optimal schedule, which is sigma star. Okay. And then, I'm saying that, okay, so if the sigma star schedule looks different, then there has to be a point when there is an inversion. And what do I mean by an inversion? An inversion is such that, I mean, it's exactly the inversion that we have talked about. It means that there are two indices, in this case, let's say m and k plus 1, such that they are in opposite direction compared to what they should have been in your greedy solution. So in your greedy solution, m actually appears after k plus 1. Okay. But in your sigma star, jm appears before jk plus 1. Not only before, they just appear before side by side. Yeah. And there is no relationship as such between m and k plus 1, except the fact that m is bigger than k plus 1. Okay. So then we do this swap and we prove that, okay, because in the greedy schedule, the ratios are in ascending order, or no, in the descending order of W over L, then this, if we swap them, then it's actually going to give you a better solution compared to sigma star. Okay. Now there is one question. So I think I would take this again next time, because there is a lot of jhol here. So let me come up with a cleaner way of convincing you next time that this is actually true. And then we can also talk about the case when the Wi over Li's are not distinct. Yeah. In fact, that will require us to make an argument along the lines of which Gaurav and Alok were suggesting. Yeah. Because now we cannot claim anymore that by doing this local swap, we are always improving the solution. Okay, we will have to say that, okay, you start with this solution, you start with any solution, and you essentially arrive to your greedy solution. That is the argument that you have to make. Okay, and in the process, you will not make your solution worse. So eventually, when you talk about non-distinct Wi over Li, that is the kind of argument that you will have to give. But I think, yeah, today there was enough confusion. So let's just take it slowly next time. Okay, so let's just do it again next time. Okay.
So just one more last thing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So why should there be a relation between JK and JK plus 1? We are claiming that some two jobs after JK are swapped.
Cool. So the point here is that JK and JK plus 1 are defined with respect to the greedy schedule. That is why there is a relationship. See, ये जो relationship हम कह रहे हैं, in fact, all these indices that we have defined, that is with respect to the greedy schedule. Or greedy schedule. Okay, is it okay now? Good, right. So Harsh, does that answer your question? So this is what defines the relationship between K and K plus 1. So it's just the indices are defined by looking at the greedy schedule. Okay, so it's not that your actually original set of jobs are arranged in this way. It's just with respect to the greedy schedule. And I know that. Yeah. Okay. And now what we are saying is that there is some point where there is this job JM, which appears much later, maybe in the greedy schedule, but which appears in place of JM. Okay. So JM पहले आ गया. तो उसके बाद, okay, if you, I know what the issue is. I think the question is that, how do you now say that JK plus 1 is here? That's a very valid point, actually, which is why I said that I should do this cleanly next time. I mean, I think there is an easier way to. Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is we should write it as JM and JM plus 1. Then it would be fine.
Sorry, JM and JM plus 1.
Sir, we are claiming that there are some two indices which are inverted according to our solution, our greedy solution.
Right.
So then we should call it JM and JM plus 1. Then it would be,
yeah, let's not even M plus 1. I should actually call this something like JR. Isn't that the most correct thing? I mean, why should it even be M plus 1? It should be something.
I'm saying JM and JM plus 1 in the new sequence, in the better sequence that we are.
But this M and M plus 1, these are defined with respect to the greedy sequence.
Original solution. Okay, sir. Then it's fine. Then we should just write M and
we should just write JM and JR in general.
Yeah. Then
yeah. Which is why I think I made a mess. So right.
Sir, you are saying that after certain K minus 1 indices, there will be certain number of inversion, which when we uninvert, then we get a better solution each time.
Okay, so first of all, we are not correcting the inversion in the following sense. Okay, so I think this is a bit important to understand. So देखो, एक तरीका है inversion undo करने का ये कि suppose तुम्हारा JM यहाँ पे आ गया and JK was pushed much later. Okay, right? So what I'm saying is that you are only correcting a local inversion in the sense that JM के बाद अगर जो भी है, so this is JR. Right? Okay. So ये दोनों में these two are at their wrong relative positions. Okay. So I'm just swapping these two and I'm not swapping anything like maybe JM and JK here. This is not what I'm doing because then I won't be able to make the argument so easily. Yeah. Because then all the jobs in between would be affected. So does that answer your question? Or is it still confusing?
Yeah, sir, it is a bit confusing.
it's a bit confusing. Okay, I suggest that, yeah, because we are out of time, let's just do it again next time. Yeah, I think, yeah, I will find a cleaner way to do this, and maybe along the lines which these guys were suggesting. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I could not do the proof very well today, but yeah, hopefully next time.